AITA for handing my wedding ring to my wife's backup husband at our anniversary dinner? My name is Max. I'm 34, and until a few months ago, I thought my marriage was boring in the safest way possible. I live just outside Nashville, Tennessee, and I work as a facilities operations manager for a regional grocery chain, which means I spend most of my day dealing with broken freezer units, vendor calls, broken doors, and people acting like a leaky ceiling is a personal attack. My wife, Lydia, was 33 and worked in marketing for a healthcare software company. We had been married for 6 years, and for most of that time, our biggest fights were about whether the thermostat should be set at 68 or 72. We had a small house with a 2-car garage, a patchy lawn I kept meaning to reseed, and a mortgage that made me check my banking app 2 times a week even when I knew exactly what was in it. On Sundays, I made coffee and usually burned the pancakes a little, and Lydia would say, "You know, some people cook breakfast without making a disaster, while eating 2 of them anyway." Nothing about us looked cinematic. We had a shared streaming account, a junk drawer full of batteries that may or may not have worked, and a hallway bathroom I had been almost done repainting for 8 months. But I liked that. I thought boring meant safe. That was the marriage I thought I was walking into our anniversary dinner to celebrate. Or at least, that was the marriage Lydia wanted everyone else to think we were celebrating. The dinner was her idea. I suggested we do something small, maybe dinner downtown and a drink afterward. Lydia pushed for a private room at a steakhouse in Nashville, one of those places with exposed brick, framed whiskey labels, and steaks priced like they had been personally minted. She said 6 years mattered, and we should be surrounded by people who love us. That line stuck with me because she had barely touched me in weeks unless someone else was watching. Still, I agreed. By then, I already knew about Grant. I didn't know everything, but I knew enough. Enough to stop doubting my own instincts. Enough to sit across from my wife at breakfast while she scrolled her phone and understand that the woman asking me to pass the creamer was also planning her lies with another man. The distance had started small. Lydia stayed late for a campaign launch, then for conference prep, then for client dinners that seemed to happen every Thursday. She started putting her phone face down on the counter. Then she changed her passcode. When I asked about it, she didn't even look up from unloading the dishwasher. "Because everyone should change their passcode once in a while," she said. "It's basic security." "Okay," I said. "I just noticed." She shut the dishwasher harder than necessary. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "Where you make me prove I'm not lying." I remember standing there with a dish towel in my hand, staring at her like I had missed 3 lines of dialogue. "I asked why you changed your passcode," I said. And I answered. That became the pattern. I would ask something ordinary, and she would turn it into an accusation against me. One night, she came home around 10:40, smelling like rain and perfume. I had reheated the chicken 2 times before finally putting foil over her plate. "Did you eat?" I asked. She dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and sighed like I had just asked for a sworn statement. "I can't do this every time I come home late, Max." I asked if you ate dinner. "I'm exhausted. Can we not turn my work schedule into a trial?" So I stopped asking as much. Not because I trusted her more, but because I was tired of being told normal questions were evidence of my insecurity. The first real clue came through our budgeting app. We had connected most of our cards years earlier because I was the one who paid the bills and tracked categories. Lydia liked that when it meant I handled the boring stuff. She liked it less when a charge popped up from a restaurant I didn't recognize. It was listed under a vague upscale restaurant name, the kind of place a client dinner could happen. But the map pin attached to the transaction was out near a boutique hotel by the airport. I was at the kitchen counter with my laptop open, comparing vendor invoices from work, when the alert came through. Lydia came in a few minutes later, kicked off her heels, and reached for a glass of water. "Was your dinner downtown or out by the airport?" I asked. Her hand froze on the cabinet. "What?" "The charge from last night. The restaurant name says one thing, but the location shows near the airport." She turned around slowly. "Do you hear yourself right now?" "I'm asking because the app shows 2 different things." It was a client dinner. Sometimes restaurants process through different locations. You handle invoices all day. You know that. I didn't know that. I also knew when someone was giving me the first explanation that came to mind. I nodded and closed the laptop. She watched me for a few seconds, waiting for a fight. When I didn't give her one, she went upstairs and took a shower. After that, I paid closer attention. Not obsessively. Not like I was following her or digging through trash. I just stopped helping her explanations make sense. I stopped sanding down the edges for her. A few days later, I was in the guest room looking for our old iPad because I needed a recipe I had saved years ago. The iPad was in a cracked gray case behind a stack of Christmas gift bags. I plugged it in, let it crawl back to life, and waited while it updated itself like it had been in a coma. When the screen lit up, message previews started appearing. Lydia had forgotten the device was still connected to her account. At first, I saw normal stuff. A work reminder, a promotional text from a salon, then a name I recognized before I wanted to. Grant. Lydia had dated Grant in college. She told me he was ancient history, the kind of ex people mentioned only when explaining bad hair choices and questionable taste. According to her, he had moved on, disappeared from her life, and existed only in old photos. The message preview said, "Last night was worth the risk." Another came in before I could move. "Don't let him ruin your mood. You deserve to feel wanted." My hands went cold. Then the third one appeared. "One day, I won't be the backup plan." That was the first time the word backup made my stomach turn. I didn't open the messages on the iPad. I knew enough about devices to know that might mark something as read or alert her in some way. Instead, I took photos of the screen with my own phone. Then I sat on the edge of the guest bed, the room dark except for the iPad glow, and listened to Lydia laughing downstairs at something on TV. There are moments when anger doesn't feel hot. It feels precise. That was how it felt for me. I wanted to walk downstairs and put the iPad in front of her. I wanted to say Grant's name just to watch her face. But I didn't. Part of that was shock. Part of it was pride. Mostly, it was because I knew Lydia. If I confronted her with fragments, she would turn the whole thing into a misunderstanding, then into an invasion of privacy, then into my fault. So I confirmed. I looked through statements. I checked dates. I reviewed the family account location history from Lydia's phone, which she had turned on years earlier after losing it at a Titans game and apparently never thought about again. I found the boutique hotel charge on a credit card. I found the same area pinged on 3 nights she had called work drinks. I found a photo she had once shown me from a happy hour where a man's wrist was barely visible at the edge of the frame. At the time, I had only noticed the drink in her hand. Now I noticed the watch. A silver watch with a dark face. Grant wore it to our anniversary dinner. 2 weeks before that dinner, I met with a divorce attorney in a bland office that smelled like bad coffee and printer toner. She had framed diplomas on the wall and the calmest voice I had ever heard. I laid out what I had. Screenshots, receipts, dates, the budgeting app alert, photos of message previews, location history. She listened, took notes, and said, "Do not threaten. Do not perform. Document and decide." I already decided, I said. Then let the process protect you from the argument. That sentence probably saved me from becoming the version of myself Lydia would have loved to describe later. I didn't tell Lydia I knew. I slept badly. I ate less. I started going to work early because it was easier to deal with a broken walk-in freezer than share a kitchen with someone who kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. Then Lydia started planning the anniversary dinner. She made a group chat for visible details. Her mom Paula, my dad Ron, my sister Hannah, her college friend Bree's husband Derek, and a few others from her circle. She talked about the steakhouse minimum spend, the cake deposit, and whether people wanted Cabernet or bourbon cocktails. She sent a little heart emoji after, "Can't believe it's been 6 years." Grant's name was not in the visible chat. That told me something. The night of the dinner, I put a manila envelope in my glove compartment before we left. It had copies of the divorce papers on top. Underneath were printed screenshots, receipts, location maps, and a few labeled pages my attorney told me not to wave around unless necessary. My plan was to get through dinner, go home, and give Lydia the papers privately. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to embarrass her parents. I didn't even want to humiliate Lydia, despite everything. I just wanted out with enough witnesses having seen us together that she couldn't claim later that I had blindsided her in some wild, unstable rage. But Lydia had invited an audience. And Bree brought the punchline. The private room at the steakhouse was warm and loud when we arrived. The air smelled like garlic butter, charred meat, and expensive bourbon. A little chalkboard near the sideboard read "Happy 6 years, Max and Lydia" in curly handwriting. The anniversary cake sat untouched under a clear plastic cover, white frosting with gold piping. Lydia immediately slipped into performance mode. She touched my shoulder while talking to her mom. She leaned into me for pictures. She called me babe 2 times in the first 10 minutes, which was 2 more times than she had said it in private all month. Smile, babe, she said while Paula lifted her phone. You look like you're being audited. I smiled. Hannah watched me from across the room. My sister has always been better at reading my face than I want her to be. She mouthed, you okay? I gave her a small nod. My dad, Ron, shook my hand when he came in and pulled me into a brief hug. He's not a dramatic man. He worked construction most of his life and can communicate entire paragraphs by clearing his throat. That night, he just said, "Good to see you, son," and squeezed my shoulder. For a while, dinner felt almost normal if you didn't know what to look for. Wedge salads arrived. Derek made a joke about needing reading glasses for the menu. Someone ordered a round of old fashions. Lydia laughed a little too loudly at Bree's stories. Bree kept glancing at Lydia like they were waiting for the same cue. Then Grant walked in after the appetizers. He wore a fitted sport coat with no tie, like he had spent time choosing an outfit that said casual but available. The silver watch with the dark face caught the light when he lifted a hand. Hey, he said, smiling at the room. Hope I'm not crashing anything. Lydia stiffened for half a second. It was small. If I had not spent the last 2 weeks teaching myself not to blink past the obvious, I might have missed it. Her fingers went to the necklace at her throat, then dropped. Her smile came on bright and late. Grant, she said. Wow. Hi. Bree stood up too fast. I told him old friends were coming. It's fine, right? Derek muttered, Bree, under his breath. I looked at Grant and said, depends who invited you. He gave a little laugh. We're all adults here. That was the thing about Grant. He acted like confidence was a substitute for decency. He sat down near Bree, across from Lydia, but close enough that they could look at each other without turning their heads. Dinner kept moving. Ribeyes came out. Garlic mashed potatoes. More wine. People talked about work, Nashville traffic, house projects, fantasy football, the usual middle-class soundtrack of people trying to pretend they are not tired all the time. Then Bree stood for a toast. She had already had 2 glasses of Cabernet, maybe 3. She lifted her glass and smiled at Lydia like they were still 22 and immortal. Okay, she said. I have to say something. Lydia laughed. Be nice. I'm always nice. Bree looked around the table. To Max and Lydia. 6 years. That's huge. Honestly, I love seeing people make marriage work, especially when one of them is as high maintenance as our girl here. People chuckled. Lydia rolled her eyes. Bree kept going. But Lydia has always been prepared, right? Career plan, backup plan. She paused, and her eyes slid toward Grant. Backup husband. The room laughed. Not everyone. Not my dad. Not Hannah. Not Derek, who suddenly became very interested in his napkin. But Lydia's friends laughed too quickly, too comfortably, like someone had opened a door to a room they had all been sitting in for months. Grant leaned back in his chair and raised his glass. Bree looked at me. Honestly, Max, you better stay on your toes. Lydia laughed with her mouth, but not with her eyes. Her hand tightened around her napkin. I laughed once. Just once. Then I said, back up for what exactly? The laughter stumbled and died. Bree blinked. Oh my goodness, don't make it awkward. It was just a joke. No, explain it, I said. My voice sounded calm even to me. Everybody laughed, so I'm assuming everybody understands it. Lydia's hand found my wrist under the table and squeezed. Hard. Max, she whispered. Stop. I gently removed her hand from my wrist and placed it back on the table. Don't whisper it to me, I said. Say it like you meant it. Paula frowned from the other end of the table. Max, honey, I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it. Bree gave an awkward laugh. See? Paula gets it. I looked at Bree. Do you? Her smile thinned. A server opened the sliding barn-style door, saw the room, and immediately backed out like he had walked into a tense situation. Grant set his glass down. This is getting blown way out of proportion. I looked at him for the first time since the joke landed. The thing I remember most is that he still looked amused. Less than before, but still enough. He thought he was safe inside the group's shared secret. He thought I was the only person at the table who didn't know the shape of my own marriage. So I stood up. The chair legs scraped against the floor. Lydia said my name in a warning tone, the one she used when she wanted me to behave in public. I took off my wedding ring. It took a second because I had worn it for 6 years. There was a pale groove on my finger when it finally came loose. I looked at it in my palm, then placed it on Grant's bread plate. The small sound it made against the ceramic was louder than Bree's entire toast. "If you've been auditioning for my place," I said, "you can start with the jewelry." Grant's smile disappeared. Lydia pushed back from the table. "Max, what is wrong with you?" I turned to her. "That's still the angle? You're embarrassing me." "No," I said. "You've confused embarrassment with accountability." She reached for my arm again, but I stepped back. "I'll be right back." Nobody moved when I left the room. The main dining area was still humming with normal restaurant noise, forks on plates, laughter, a bartender shaking something over ice. It felt wrong that the rest of the world kept going. Outside, the air was cold enough to clear my head. I walked to our car, opened the passenger door, and took the manila envelope from the glove compartment. For a second, I stood there with one hand on the roof of the car and breathed. I was not calm because I didn't care. I was calm because I had already spent every loud feeling alone. When I walked back in, my dad was standing near the door of the private room. He didn't ask a question. He didn't block me. He just looked at the envelope, then at my face, and nodded once. I went back to the table and placed the envelope beside my ring. "The top pages are divorce papers," I said to Lydia. "The rest are copies." Lydia's expression changed in stages. Anger first, then confusion, then something close to fear. "Copies of what?" Paula asked. I opened the envelope and pulled out the first few pages. I did not throw them. I did not wave them around. I placed them on the table like an invoice. Text from Grant. Hotel receipts. The restaurant charge by the airport. Location history for the nights Lydia said she had worked drinks. A message from Bree telling Lydia to delete the thread before she got home. Bree went pale. Derek closed his eyes for a second and whispered, "Goodness." Lydia shook her head. "You went through my phone?" "No," I said. "You left your messages connected to the old iPad in the guest room." "That's still private." "So was our marriage." Grant pushed his chair back slightly. "This isn't what it looks like." I almost laughed. "Grant," I said, "one of your texts says, 'One day, I won't be the backup plan.' So this is exactly what it looks like. You were just hoping I couldn't read." His face tightened. "We didn't mean for that to happen." "For me to find out?" I asked. He looked away. Lydia's mother reached for one of the pages with a trembling hand. "Lydia, what is this?" Lydia snapped. "Mom, don't." Paula pulled her hand back like she had been slapped. A few minutes earlier, she had been ready to smooth everything over with honey and denial. Now she was staring at her daughter like she was seeing the outline of a stranger. Bree tried to recover. "Max, the joke was harmless. I didn't know you were going to turn it into this whole thing." "A harmless joke doesn't need a hotel receipt and a cleanup plan," I replied. Her mouth opened, then closed. Derek looked at me from across the table. He seemed ashamed in a way that told me he had known something was off and had filed it under none of my business until it became too ugly to ignore. "I didn't know all of it," he said quietly. I believed him. I also didn't care very much. Lydia stood. Her chair tipped backward and hit the wall. "Can we talk outside?" "No." "Max," her voice cracked, but I could not tell if it was fear or strategy. "Please, not like this. You chose like this when you invited everyone to watch us pretend. That's not fair." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were wet. Her makeup was still perfect. The necklace she touched when Grant walked in rested against her collarbone. I remembered buying it for her birthday, standing in the mall jewelry store feeling proud because I had picked something without asking Hannah for help. "You don't get to call me insecure anymore," I said. "Not after making me the last person in the room to know my own marriage was over." She flinched. Then she did what Lydia always did when cornered. She tried to make my reaction the problem. "You humiliated me in front of my family." I nodded. "You invited witnesses." I brought context. Grant stood halfway, then sat down again, like he couldn't decide whether leaving made him look guilty or staying made him look responsible. "We're all adults here," he said again, but this time it sounded like a man asking permission to disappear. I slid the envelope toward Lydia. "Communication about the house, finances, or separation goes through my attorney. I'm not changing locks illegally. I'm not keeping you from your belongings. But I'm done being managed." Lydia whispered, "You planned this." "No," I said. "I planned to give you the papers privately. Bree planned this." Bree stared at the table. I turned to my dad and Hannah. "Thank you for coming." Hannah was already standing. Her face was red, and she looked like she wanted to say 12 things to Lydia, but she didn't. She just came to my side. My dad put cash on the table even though I had paid the deposit. Old habits. Then he stepped beside me. As we reached the door, Lydia said, "Max, please don't leave." I looked back once. The cake was still untouched on the sideboard. The little gold 6 on top leaned slightly to the left. My ring sat on Grant's bread plate, and he was not touching it. "Enjoy the cake," I said. "I paid the deposit, so someone might as well." Then I left. In the parking lot, the noise from the room got cut off when the steakhouse door closed behind us. Nashville traffic moved past on the road like nothing important had happened. Hannah wrapped her arms around me so hard it hurt. "I'm sorry," she said. My dad put his hand on my shoulder. That was all. No speech. No questions. Just weight and warmth. I stayed at Hannah's that night. I slept on her couch under a throw blanket that smelled like lavender detergent and dog, because her golden retriever kept trying to climb on me like I had personally requested emotional support. My phone lit up until I turned it face down. Lydia called 14 times before midnight. Then came the texts. "You humiliated me in front of my family. I can't believe you did that to us. You had no right to share private information." Then, around 1 a.m., she wrote, "Can we please talk like adults?" I answered once. "For anything about the house, finances, or separation, contact my attorney." She replied almost immediately. "So that's it. 6 years, and you won't even talk to me." I didn't answer. The next few days were ugly but quieter than I expected. Lydia tried to tell people I had blindsided her and ambushed her. The problem was that too many people had been in the room. Too many people had seen Grant. Too many people had heard Bree's joke land like a confession. Mutual friends split into categories fast. Some apologized. Some disappeared. A few sent careful messages like, "I didn't know it was that serious," which was a sentence that told me they had known enough. Derek called me 3 days later. "I should have said something," he said. "Yeah," I said. There wasn't much else to add. Bree tried once to message me a long explanation about how Lydia had been confused and how she had only been trying to support her friend. I didn't respond. Hannah did ask for permission to respond on my behalf, and I told her no because I didn't need my sister getting into serious trouble over a woman named Bree. Grant lasted about as long as I expected. Once Lydia needed him to be more than an exciting alternative, he evaporated. From what I heard, she asked him where they stood after the dinner, and he told her he needed space because things had gotten toxic. Then he blocked her for a while. That part did not make me happy. It made me tired. Lydia had risked a marriage for a man who liked being chosen only when it cost him nothing. Practical separation is not dramatic in the way people imagine. It is passwords, boxes, bank accounts, forwarding addresses, and realizing someone you loved is now a logistics problem. I removed Lydia as my emergency contact at work. I changed streaming passwords and utilities. I slept badly in my own house for the first week after she moved into a short-term rental. She accused me of being cold during mediation. Maybe I was. But cold was the only temperature that kept things from falling apart entirely. The house stayed with me after negotiations, mostly because I had documented payments, repairs, and financial responsibility. It was not some big courtroom victory. It was paperwork, bank statements, and the fact that I had always been the person who kept receipts. The first weekend alone in the house, I replaced the mattress. Not because that fixed anything. It didn't. But I needed one room to feel like it belonged to me again. The house was quieter without her, but for the first time in months, quiet didn't feel like a warning. Paula called once. I almost didn't answer. When I did, she sounded smaller than usual. "I'm sorry, Max," she said. I leaned against the kitchen counter and looked at the spot where Lydia used to drop her keys. "Thank you," I said. I should have asked more questions. Me too. Neither of us had much more to say after that. Weeks later, I found the anniversary reservation receipt folded behind my insurance card in my wallet. I had forgotten it was there. The steakhouse name was printed at the top, then the deposit amount, then the date. I stood in my kitchen with morning coffee brewing and pancakes getting slightly too dark in the pan because apparently betrayal does not improve cooking skills. For a second, I just looked at the receipt. I thought about the room, the whiskey labels on the wall, the untouched cake, Bree's glass raised in the air, Grant's smile fading when my ring hit his plate, Lydia telling me I had embarrassed her, as if embarrassment was something I had created instead of something she had earned. Then I threw the receipt in the trash. No speech, no dramatic gesture, just paper hitting the bottom of the bin. I didn't feel victorious. A marriage ending is not a trophy, even when you were the one who had to end it. But I felt free in a way I had not felt while living with Lydia's secrets. I no longer had to pretend not to notice the phone turned over on the counter. I no longer had to measure my questions so carefully that the truth would not accuse me of being insecure. I used to think staying calm meant swallowing disrespect. Now I know it can also mean walking away before someone convinces you their betrayal is your problem. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.